my name is Margaret Adele, and welcome to another indie book review. And this is another first for me. Not only do I not get a ton of specific holiday books for review, I've also never done an anthology collection. I have reviewed some short story collections wherein all of the short stories were written by the same author, but this is the first time that I have read a work where a ton of different authors contributed. So I'm hoping that I can do this justice. So today I am reviewing a Krampus Carol. This is the fifth in the Gothic Blue Book series, where all of these books are based on horror short stories, and this book in particular is all about Christmassy or Yuletide horror stories, specifically around the idea of Krampus. And I think Krampus is fairly well known in Western culture, especially in the last couple of years. But basically, if you don't know, he is tied to St. Nicholas, and he's kind of like St. Nicholas's like evil brother, whereas St. Nicholas rewards the good kids with treats in certain countries, and well before the 25th of December. Krampus will come and either whip bad children or steal them into a sack and take them away. Specifically, bad boys, or at least that's what this collection kind of made it sound like. Now, right off the bat, this does have a lot of references to a lot of those European or Nordic ideas and culture and folktales. And in a lot of cases, especially in the few poems that are in the collection, not a lot is explained. So it's one of those things where for a lot of them, you kind of already have to know. But the Krampus one specifically, of which there are the most, you get the gist. He's the boogeyman. You do bad around Christmas. He comes to take the bad kids away type of thing. And a lot of it is just different variations on that. There are also some other traditions, like from Wales. There's a random one in Australia, which I don't think is actually based on Australian culture. It just kind of came across like Australian vampires. But because so much of the anthology is around Krampus, who is essentially a cautionary tale to children, a lot of the stories are morality tales, which I'm kind of iffy about when it comes to horror, because for me, a morality tale makes it a little less scary, because the general gist is, if you're not a brat or a dick or an asshole and you just be good, you're not in that much danger. The danger is really only to the really bratty kids or the really bad people. A lot of negligent, abusive fathers in this anthology. That's when Krampus comes out. There were very few stories, although there were a couple, in which Krampus was coming after people who you could reasonably say did not deserve it, and those ones were much more scary to me. And I have my notes, and I usually don't have to reference these too much when I do these kind of things, but I didn't want to just gloss over all of the stories, but neither can I go into each of the stories in poetry in depth. So I'm going to talk about a couple that kind of stuck out to me. Most of them for the better, some maybe for the worst. Alright, so I'll talk about the one that kind of made me iffy on the side of a morality tale, and that would be The Path by Kathleen Palm. And the biggest reason this one struck me particularly the wrong way was, technically, yes, the young boy protagonist of this story who is dealing with Krampus and Krampus-related magic technically did a bad thing, but in the context of the story, it is a lash out as the result of very severe abuse and trauma. And so the idea that this trauma response was the bad thing that brought Krampus out and is framed as him deserving it because he didn't quote unquote choose love didn't sit well with me. And this might just be a me thing because I'm a foster parent, so dealing with kids that have behavior issues as a result of trauma and neglect is a very big part of my life. And this idea that those behaviors that are caused by that level of abuse, and it's fairly abusive in the story, could be considered 100% morally wrong and worth that kind of judgment, did not sit well with me, and I will give the author the benefit of that out and say that like maybe it was supposed to be that Krampus really just is that legalistic, moralistic, where he doesn't have those gray areas or that compassion. Because in other stories, he certainly doesn't. But that one just wasn't. I didn't like the kind of morality tale it was trying to portray, especially in the way that like all of the disembodied voices were talking to him. Like, yeah, no, he didn't choose love because he was abused. Like, what? But anyway, one of my favorite versions of this kind of gray area Krampus morality tale was simply called Krampus by Austrian Spencer, and this is Krampus, but make it an app wherein everyone can basically swipe right or left with someone nice or naughty. Only the problem is that people don't actually use it the right way. They just want to be negative for the fun of being negative, or like put down people for the sake of putting down people. And it has disastrous, catastrophic consequences. I loved the concept, I loved the idea, and I loved the themes of maybe we do look at our fellow humans way more negatively than we should, and maybe we should like back off just a little bit. Another one that I felt really dealt with the kind of gray areas of the morality of the Krampus tale well was All Quiet on the Northern Front by Kara Rice Moore. This is basically, how does Krampus feel about all the soldiers fighting each other in World War I? And I don't know the myths of Krampus very well, but according to this story, basically anyone under the age of 21 is considered within his realm to punish, although even in like some stories they consider even grown adults in his realm to punish. And so all these 18-year-old soldiers off fighting for the first time are considered within his realm, and he has very particular views on them, and I really liked that kind of take on folktale meets war, and what would these folktale creatures think about these kind of very human wars. And that one I thought portrayed the realities of trench warfare of World War I really well, and was also probably one of the scariest, because you could argue that none of the soldiers in the story had technically really done anything that would have been even considered wrong in their own time, or even ours, technically. So I loved all the little nuances in that story particularly. Beyond the Krampus tales, there were also a lot of references to just various stories taking place in winter. There were a couple of different ones where it's like, wasn't directly tied to a holiday, or maybe it just was kind of a bad thing happening around a holiday. But those I still kind of liked, mostly because it still used the concept of spookiness or of winter and that kind of feelings well. Probably my favorite of that one was Black Lace Binding by Laurel Hightower. I love the concept of this mysterious book and what she wants to use it for, and what it, oh, I don't want to give anything away, but why the book is so short. That's all I'll say about that. And there's also some other ones, like our Australian vampires. The Creature of Darkness by Lawrence Salani, which was like a Christmas story in that like it happened around Christmas, and one of the characters says something about a present on Christmas, and that's really the most it had to do with it. Now, I kind of could see the big twist coming a mile off, but only because that was the only thing that would really have been a twist, and I've read enough stories like that. It was not a fault of the story inherently, more just if you've read enough in the genre, you can kind of tell where those things go. But I liked that it was in a completely different place, and I think it was like the only one where it was like really warm. Even the one that took place in a beach house kind of had like a chilly vibe, if that makes sense. Like it technically wasn't a beach house, so it was a little bit warmer, but like you still got like the gist of coldness. Is this making sense? In general, this is definitely a kind of anthology that is going to be very niche. This is going to be something that you need to already have some awareness of, like some idea who Krampus is. And there's one story with, I think you pronounce the name Frau Perkta, which is the like basically Yuletide witch, which I need more stories with her, quite frankly. I also liked that I actually had a story, there was a story based on an author I've reviewed before, The Wreath by Monique Quintana, which was in her usual magic realism style, and also involved a lovely WLW romance, which I greatly appreciated. It was a while ago, but I reviewed her book or novella, Cenote City, much magical realism, which unfortunately I discovered wasn't for me. But if you like that, fantastic. I highly suggest this one. So in general, I gave this collection 4 stars. I loved the ambiance. There was a lot of emphasis on the smell of decaying flesh, which, you know, is kind of what you want in your supernatural horror. Just a little bit too much emphasis on morality tales that lessened the fear for me a little bit. But in general, the outcomes of each story were different enough, some negative, some positive, that it never felt like you knew exactly how the story was going to end, which always left you on your toes a little bit, and I like that. And if you do have a love of very specific holiday-themed horror and the Krampus and all those kind of myths, you will love this one. I can't say it's going to do it for anyone else, but if you're in that niche, great way to fill that niche. Now, if you are an indie author and you would like a book review, please send me an email. I will have my email down in the description below. I will also have my review policy down there. I'm not too close to filling up all my slots, but I have significantly slowed down on my reviewing lately because holidays and newborn in the house and in December and everything. So I might end up having to close soon, so be aware of that. But with nothing else to say, I hope you have a wonderful day and a marvelous tomorrow.